Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Muckrake Podcast. I'm Jared Yates, Sexton. I'm here with my friend, my co-host, my co-conspirator, Nick Hauselman. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Just really quickly, in this day and age, I had a flat tire. Instead of having to deal with that and get it somewhere, whatever, a company came to my house with a brand new tire, and in 15 minutes, boom, 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 gave me a new tire. Amazing! Like what a country we live in.
No, don't let anybody tell you America's in decline.
Right. No, you can get.
Wait, time out. I'm sorry to put you on blast. I have to ask this question. Do you know how to change a tire?
Nope, not a clue. Nope, not even an inkling.
Not even the beginning of it.
I've seen a movie where they did it once, and then whatever, but that's about all I know.
Wait, what? How they do it?
You know, they had that machine.
Wait, are you talking about like you went to like a NASCAR movie? Is that what you're telling me?
I mean, listen, was a tire changed and did I see it? Yes. I'm not going to really get into the details.
We need to teach you how to change a tire.
I don't think you want me anywhere near like a heavy piece of machinery and a jack and all sorts of things. I don't know.
I mean, we gotta. What if you're out in the middle? Okay. We will handle this off mic.
Okay.
It's fine. It's fine. Well, I'm glad that your flat tire got taken care of. I'm glad you're well in spite of it and that you're in awe of the services that the United States of America offers. Luckily, we get to talk about the decline of America in this episode.
Luckily.
We've got a full show. The Iran war. It's hot, folks. Much like the United States of America, according to our president. The war, it's hot. We've also got a diarrhea outbreak that we have to talk about. It's incredible the things that are happening. Also, no longer will the FBI investigate crimes committed around ICE. And also, you can say goodbye to the American PhD programs. All of this and more on the Muckrake Podcast. A reminder, if you like this show, if you support this show, we need your help to keep this thing going. Head over to patreon.com/Muckrake Podcast and become a patron. You gain access to the Weekender episodes on Friday, specials, live shows, all of that stuff. But also it helps this show because we have no corporate backing whatsoever. Also, if you're listening to this, send it out to your friends, your family member, your colleagues, people who need to understand what's going on. We appreciate everybody who subscribes, and you make this entire thing possible. And just thank you to everybody. And please, if you haven't already, patreon.com/Muckrake Podcast. Nick, the Iran war, we have to start here again. This thing is escalating in so many different ways. The analysis is starting to change and shift. Some of the things that I've been seeing for the past few months have started to move in some very, very observable directions. We're seeing strikes outside the Strait of Hormuz, including U.S. attacks on civilian infrastructure within Iran. Iran has hit U.S. installations around the Middle East, including a strike that killed 2, possibly 3 troops. Meanwhile, the Houthis, they're now in it, everybody. They are planning to block Saudi Arabia from passage through the Red Sea, which will affect roughly 3% of global oil and deal another blow to Saudi Arabia. Nick, oil prices are on the rise. Things are looking worse and worse with every single second. And by the way, the president of the United States of America, Trump, this weekend, when asked about it, he said, quote, "I don't really care." So how are you feeling about this situation?
Right. He's ready to take his ball and go home.
He's done. He's over it.
I don't know how you knew. I don't know why. I guess I felt so strongly that they would just peter out with a little bit of an agreement, go back to normal, the oil prices, yada, yada. But you knew that was not going to happen and that we are going to get stuck. I guess what you knew was this would continue to get worse and prolong. Yep. Do you know how many injured soldiers we've had since this whole thing started?
I don't even know what the number is because the Pentagon's hidden that number.
Well, what has been reported is 400 minimum. Oof. Now, and then over a dozen deaths for without any kind of ground incursion. So I'm old enough to remember. You remember when Osama bin Laden did his whole thing? You know what his chief gripe was? You know the reason why he built this whole thing up? Do you remember what his chief thing was?
U.S. bases in the Middle East.
Yeah, U.S. bases in the Middle East. He wanted the presence of the United States out of the Middle East. Iran might be able to do that.
They have effectively done it already. Yep.
Right? Yep. And what's worse is that it just feels like the United States was simply ill prepared for any notion that they would bomb their bases nearby. Like, oh, maybe they'll take a shot at our ships in the Gulf or whatever. But no, this is a very vulnerable thing for the United States, which is why there's so many people getting hurt. I think they attacked like barracks where they sleep and hit like over 10 or 15 or 20 of these things. That's why we have to severely doubt whether the death toll is only the 3 or the 4 that they're saying, because you have to imagine if these are living quarters and they destroyed a bunch of them, that more people would have died.
Yeah, we have no idea what's actually taken place in this war. And I want to start with a little bit of a flippant anecdote and then move into the other analysis of where things are shifting. Nick, there was this guy that I went to school with, and he was always seen as sort of a badass. You know, he always talked about how good he was at karate, how many fights he had gotten into. You know, like people were just like, oh, really? Do not mess with that guy. And you know what happened eventually when someone got in a fight with him? They beat the living hell out of him.
Oh.
Right? Because all of that swagger and all of that buildup, all of it, it was based on perception. And the United States of America had the perception of this globe bestriding behemoth that could not be beaten or destroyed. Meanwhile, we find ourselves here. And this is the reason I knew where this thing was going, because there is absolutely nothing in this situation that is to our advantage. Every single one of those bases was vulnerable and was going to be taken out if someone was willing to fire off some missiles and fire off some rounds against the United States of America, and also have the backdrop of, are you going to invade us? No, you're not going to do that. Now, by the way, there are rumors that, yeah, we could possibly take Carg Island. We could possibly get boots on the ground. Trump is apparently willing to escalate this war. But here's a problem, Nick. You want to hear something fun? The whole thing that started this in terms of Iran gaining the advantage, where they had all of these rockets, they had all of these drones that were extremely inexpensive, and America had all of these extremely expensive missiles and weapon systems. You want to hear something fun, Nick? We still haven't built them back up. We haven't replenished our stockpile in order to fight an actual war. You know why? Because decades of the military-industrial complex, it created a bloated military that paid a ton of money, shocker of shockers, for a bunch of weapons that were hard to produce and also expensive. Iran knows it doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't. All it has to do at this point is prolong this situation. And if it prolongs the situation, all of the incentives at this point are towards the United States of America declining in power, its economy being hit, and basically destroying American hegemony in the Middle East. Now, what is Iran doing? Iran create situations where we go in and we negotiate. We offer them billions upon billions of dollars, everything that they could possibly want. They signed this stupid MOU that was never going to last. Now it's hot again. Guess what? They're saying they're willing to talk. So it just keeps prolonging the thing, and it just keeps bleeding the United States of America. And in the meantime, Nick, whenever the war gets hot, what is Iran doing? It's trying to set off a larger regional war. They've already destroyed OPEC. Saudi Arabia at this point, you want to talk about a country that's like got its back against the wall. Now it's going to lose basically its lifeline in oil production and oil shipping with the Houthis, who, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't the United States of America have to sign a treaty with the Houthis because this small band of people were able to defeat them? So now all of these situations are getting worse in the Middle East. The United States of America has reached the point where our stockpiles are dwindled. Everything that we tried to do in order to stave off the economic consequences that were coming down the road, they're gone. And now Iran not only is in the catbird seat, but they just get to continue playing this game over and over unless we put boots on the ground. And if that happens, the situation's going to get worse and they'll probably hand us our ass. So all of this is moving along at exactly the pace and with all of the movements that you would have expected it to, if you were able to look at it and say, oh my God, this wasn't just a giant mistake. This was a potential flaw toward American hegemony.
Does this make George H.W. Bush look even smarter at this point? You know what I mean? It makes
with the first Iraq war.
Right, because they understood that this whole region is not an area that's easily attacked anyway. It's got boundaries that make it almost impossible. And I think with the Houthis, that when we got into that little spat with them, I believe the phrase that the United States had to use back to them was "my bad." Right? They basically were like, "Sorry, dude, we're out of here. We're not going to deal with you guys," because again, they're dug into the territory as well. So, you know what they should do? And by the way, I almost feel terrible. It's turned me into a guy like strategizing against the United States, right? You're kind of looking at this from the underdog. Oh, Iran, the upstart, but what would be hilarious is if they should take over Iraq. They should just go in and take a couple bases over in Iraq and really, because can you imagine what that response would be to all those people who are probably still hanging around and trying to, text Trump if they started Iraq up again? I can't even begin to imagine how they would lose their minds.
Well, and what you're bringing up at this point, because we've now entered this new phase of the situation. Like originally, like if you're looking at it through an analyst standpoint, you're sort of looking at, oh, this was a mistake going in here. Here are the inevitable consequences that are going to take place. Now all of a sudden, the decision tree of what can happen, it gets wilder. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you something, Nick. I'm not telling you with 100% certainty that this is going to happen, but we are looking at the potential of a lot of these Gulf states that sort of signed their own death warrant by signing up for the petrodollar system with the United States of America. They made tons of money. They gained tons of power. They had these regimes that would then go in and, oppress people and extract things from them. We don't know if will one of these states fall. Will one of these states have dissidents or movements push against, the people in power? Will we see Saudi Arabia? I talked about this, I want to say, a couple of months ago. Will we see Saudi Arabia move on the UAE because the OPEC has collapsed? Eventually, the economic pressure is going to need a release somewhere. Eventually, somewhere, these countries that are now struggling because their entire base of their economy and political power are now gone, we now enter into the next phase, which is as America suffers economically, these countries are also going to suffer economically, and they are less what you would call secure in terms of a power base. So now you're going to start seeing some of these actors, like, is Saudi Arabia now supposed to go after the Houthis? We've already saw Saudi Arabia sort of attack clandestinely, Iran. Are they going to lash out against them? Is it going to move in all these sort of asymmetrical directions? So we've now entered into this next phase, which is extremely chaotic, extremely kinetic. And like, I'm sure we're going to be told that there are going to be negotiations within the next few days in order to try and get the markets under control. But none of this is going to, none of it's going to put the snake back into the can of peanuts at this point. Like everything at this point is just really, really chaotic. And there's no way to know where any of these dominoes are going to fall.
Yeah, and they've been eliminating leadership across the entire War Department, Defense Department, whatever you want to call it, in a way that like this is why we didn't get into these things. I'm kind of curious. There's so many different questions. I suppose one question would have to be, I think we could explore is, well, what would the deal be for Iran to accept and actually stop doing, having little tit for tat, missile strikes back? What do they ultimately want to get out of this eventually?
Okay, that's a great question. So I want to point out, by the way, that this war got hot again because the United States struck Iran during this long funeral procession for the Ayatollah. Right. And Americans lose sight of this. Like we look at this through economic considerations, geopolitical considerations. For a lot of members of the Iranian leadership, he killed their fucking not just leader, but their religious leader. Right. So it means something different for them. This is a long-term rivalry with the United States of America that has hurt Iranian, not just the economy, but its culture. It's led to worsening conditions in this country. They are in this for the long run because it's not just what considerations are they looking for. Literally, the United States of America is going to have to bargain for its own fate. And considering that, Iranians don't have an incentive to bail the United States out. They're in the pit, they've got them where they want them. All of these consequences are going to match up and hurt the United States on a level that no sort of financial considerations, no, sort of sanctions considerations, none of those are going to outweigh defeating the United States of America and sort of rising themselves up. So this is going to they're going to continue to quote unquote negotiate, but it's just bleeding at this point. It's almost, Nick, it's almost like a predator toying with their prey. You know what I mean? Like, oh, maybe I'll let you go. Maybe I'll let you go. Maybe this is about over. No, we're not. Right? Oh, you're getting out of here. No, I'm going to pull you by your tail back into the fracas because there is no incentive at this point that outweighs what they can potentially achieve.
Fair enough. I mean, but I think that, let's just pretend we could actually put some numbers to some paper and look at that. Like, clearly they would want to have, control over the Strait of Hormuz, probably be able to charge a fee to go through it. They would certainly want to be able to have nuclear weapons if they want.
Well, time out. They've already got control of the Strait of Hormuz. We already offered them the ability to put tolls on all of this, and that didn't do it.
Okay. Okay, so that's not it. Because here's what is interesting concern is that you have someone in the White House who probably would bang on his desk and having a tantrum and accidentally hit a button that would then launch nuclear missiles at Iran, and that would end up being a particular line. I would have to imagine that would. I mean, what would the ramifications be? Let's just say he fired off a nuclear missile and hit in the middle of Iran. Well, let's say he did in the middle of Iran, like not even like in a populous area, but just to make the point. Like, what are the ramifications of that?
So, okay, now we're going into this back against the wall, panicked like response, right? And I do want to say very quickly, just as like a consideration when we're going through this analysis, Nick, we've talked about it. This administration has created a demolition project. They're trying to ruin the economy so that a bunch of wealthy people can gobble up as many resources as possible and consolidate power. So the question about whether or not Trump is going to react out of a panic, whether it's putting boots on the ground or using, sort of strategic nuclear weapons, that possibility sort of goes down a little bit. It's not zero. That's not, like a big thing, but it's not like a huge possibility. It's still there because Donald Trump is tempestuous and absurd and stupid and demented. But at this point, if we were to do something like that, which is sort of for lack of a better term, the Trump card that we have in our arsenal at this point, like international condemnation. Like if that, like the United States is already well on its way to becoming a pariah nation, a pariah state, but like that would send it over the top. So like it would be disastrous, not just for the people in Iran, but it would be disastrous for the United States as well. And by the way, it would probably be the starter pistol on like the next level of invasion of neighboring countries around the world. Like if that were to happen, I mean, Taiwan wouldn't be able to sleep at night.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, and it's a significant worry. I feel like when the more Trump's going to get cornered into this thing, and we know he's nuclear curious as it is, like he might want to do it. Now, the question then would be, would anybody stand up to him and say, like, you cannot do this? Because clearly someone should have said that already from the beginning. Because let's not forget, like I brought this up the last time. The fact that they don't even talk about dismantling the influence that Iran has on Hezbollah, for instance, like that might have even been the more easy thing to try and do out of all of this. Like stop Hezbollah from being funded. And then, they're the ones who are, doing a lot of the damage in the Middle East as it is. That doesn't come up at all. And now Trump seems to be completely focused on the nuclear strikes, right? He keeps saying that, like, that's the only reason they're not going to die in vain. That these soldiers died fighting to stop, a nuclear capability in Iran. But I just, now we're going to be at the point where there isn't going to be any way out of this. Are they just going to slink off and be like, okay, never mind, and then not even get an agreement and just sort of just go back? I don't understand now where we are, because again, what you had said was right in terms of like this, there isn't going to be any kind of MOU or agreement that's going to be binding at this point. Like I can't seem to follow that line of reasoning now where we are.
Well, that's because with respect, and I understand why it happens, you're still operating from a system of geopolitics that's now extinct, right? Like you're looking at it through the lens of like a president or an administration that actually wants things to work, right? They actually want the results to be good, as opposed to, stealing and basically boiling down like a project through like vulture capitalism. Like they don't care that these consequences are coming down the pike. Like any president, first of all, wouldn't have gotten into this war understanding, what everybody has known for years now. Like the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, everybody knew this. Everybody knew that this was going to happen, and they had, an intelligent understanding, an informed understanding of doing this. Now, we have a situation where I think Trump saying he doesn't really care, I think that's one of the most telling things, because that's not his project. If I were president right now, if I got into office and like they were like, hey, you have to deal with this Iranian crisis, what do? You pull out of the area, right? You count your losses, you leave, you try and figure out something without, all of the military buildup in the area. You pull back, you start having conversations, you figure out a way to somewhat open the Strait of Hormuz, but you more or less, you say, hey, we fucking lost this war. And we need to look at why we lost this war. They don't have the capability to do it. They only have one gear, which is going forward. And, I mean, Nick, we didn't even talk about it last week because we ran out of time. The Secretary of Defense, his main focus right now is checking the testosterone levels on our troops. Like, these are not serious people. These are not people who have the same goals. So as a result, all of these mistakes are just going to be compounded, and we're beaten, but we can't admit that we're beaten. So as a result, we're simply going to continue the cycle that's going to get worse with every single passing day.
And the biggest worry is that we require these friendly neighboring countries to help us launch these attacks. And when Iran starts bombing them, it's going to take no time for them to be like, yeah, get the hell out of here. We're not helping you anymore because our guys are now being murdered from
well,
this.
Even the system that kept those states in our orbit, those don't have incentives anymore. Like, we don't even have the economic ties that we used to. They're not able to produce oil. And as long as we're in those countries, they're going to continue being struck and their economies are going to start falling apart. We're watching this grinding down of this old system that's going to die. So what you just said is correct. I mean, I don't think the Saudis are going to tell us to leave anytime soon. But if there's a political upheaval, you might very well see us have to leave Saudi Arabia. Because none of this stuff is just going to correct itself. It's going to grind down until finally somebody takes something on the chin and they figure out the consequences on the other side.
Right. And it would have been so much nicer if we didn't have a political party that wanted to deny climate change, because this connects to oil. And if we didn't rely on oil so much, then it wouldn't be such an issue that the Strait of Hormuz is closed and they're squeezing off the world economy. It's all these things. And, we just saw that he's going to dismantle an agency that gives the judges in our country information about climate change because he just continues to say it's a hoax. And here we are. It really, it's really frustrating that we've gotten to this point where science is a 4-letter word.
It's all fucking frustrating. By the way, Nick, speaking of frustrating, this is one of the dumber but more predictable kind of stories. An outbreak across 34 states of, God, I hate having to even use this word on a podcast, explosive diarrhea from a Cyclospora parasite has been traced back to a major corporate producer conglomerate called Taylor Farms. But as of this morning, the FDA has released an announcement that they reversed their findings, saying that the results were a false positive. So we still have this multi-state, dozens of states. I believe the last number was over 8,000 cases of people with this parasitical caused diarrhea. We thought we figured out where it was coming from. All signs and science pointed to that. And then mysteriously and magically, the FDA changed that ruling. We have to be very careful because we don't know specifically what happened, but knowing the nature of the Trump administration, I think anybody who looks at this and actually thinks about it probably understands how we arrived at this point.
Sure. I think it just shows you the depth of their depravity that we entertain the thought that this could be completely, that CDC would be compromised or FDA is compromised on this one. But here's the thing. The false positive is from a different batch. It's not the original batch. So that we don't really still know where the original diarrhea outbreak came from. They know that Taco Bell is the ground zero, I think, or certainly has a connection between all these things. But you have to remember that most people might not even report that they're sick because I don't know. I don't know about you, but a lot of people I know, maybe including me, exist in this framework of functioning anyway normally. So that's not even that different for some people. But I'm sorry, I'm a very high-minded person. I got to tell you, Jared. I've read Homer. I've dissected Dante's Inferno, but a good diarrhea joke gets me every time. I'm sorry.
It happens.
It happens.
It happens.
Yes, it happens. Now, so anyways, I want to make it clear that it's possible that that was a false positive because it's not easy to do that kind of PRC test on lettuce. But the guy has certainly been a huge donor to Trump. And it makes you have to, question whether or not they made a phone call like Trump called, the soccer people and all these different things to change tests and change results just, because it's corrupt.
So there are a couple of larger stories from all of this that move beyond the idea of not being able to trust what it is that we eat at any given point. And for the record, this is not the first outbreak that we've had from, not just produce, but food within the United States of America. This is an ongoing problem. And there are a couple of things that I there's speculation here and there's grounded truth. The speculation, of course, from a lot of people is that this was diagnosed as coming from this major corporation, which controls like so much of the produce in the United States of America. They do white label production for corporations like Walmart, Target, and Kroger. By the way, it might be a good idea in the future when we get some actual reform to get rid of white labeling, in which people don't know where things are coming from. They're just put in a different bag. You aren't able to trace all these things. There is the possibility that, and this would be the shocker of shockers, that this administration is a pay-to-play administration, that they have been bribed routinely by corporations within the United States of America, by donors, and also foreign entities. This is the end result of something like that. If that's what happened, this is why you don't want a corrupt administration. But there's another problem here too, Nick, which is this is what happens in an age of monopolization. When you have corporations that grow this large and they gobble up competitors and they create such a giant share of an industry, eventually at some point, somewhere, something is either going to go wrong or they're going to spend less money on, looking at these things, figuring out whether or not their products are going to hurt people or make people sick. This is why you can't have monopolies. You have to go after this stuff. And for the record, politically, this is as winning of a message as you could ever imagine. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. You should be able to eat food without getting sick in supposedly the most powerful country in the history of the world. This is a large, large problem, and it's only going to be obscured the more that this corruption grows and this type of administration holds power.
For sure. And the only thing that I'm more worried or more amazed at right now, first of all, I'm more amazed that something like sausage isn't the culprit here. I can remember in the first administration when they had dismantled some of the requirements that they had for, keeping these factories in clean and whatever. The guy that owned the sausage making factory was like, I'm not going to eat this anymore. I wouldn't eat my own stuff. So that's amazing. But it's also, it's the same idea where in terms of like something like COVID, right? Like, as I understand, I remember in the mid 90s talking to people who were in medical school saying, you have no idea what's possible. Like they were learning about these kind of things. And COVID was probably what they were talking about, but there could be a lot worse. So the dismantling of what Trump has been doing in the name of making it cheaper for companies to exist ultimately causes death, right? We kind of already know that. And it kind of is amazing that it hasn't been worse than it is, which is a distinctly Republican argument, right? They'd be like, oh, it's just a little diarrhea. What could possibly be wrong? When we know that diarrhea could definitely lead to death as well. But it's the underlying symptom that we have every right to be extremely concerned about, as we have this insane person as the Department of Health who kind of claims to want to have clean food, right? And wants to clean that all up. And I kind of actually agree with a lot of the things he says about that, but then systematically has dismantled all the protections. That's what's so crazy about this. And that's what you have to hope we can turn around at the beginning. Like, even if it's not in the White House, we got to figure out how to get the CDC back and WHO back in good standing, and FTC, FDA, and all, FTC too, everybody.
Yeah, and I want to make two quick points before we move on. First things first, the corruption of an administration like this is directly tethered to an era of monopolization. Like, there is no way possible to have these larger corporations that are going to hurt consumers. And by the way, it's not just food. We know this. It's the air, it's the environment, it's the drugs, it's all of it. We shouldn't have a situation. People say all the time, they're like, oh, how many people has socialism or communism killed? We don't know how many people capitalism has killed, even in the modern era. We are told that we just have to sort of accept that we have this system where people are getting sick all the time. People are becoming climate refugees. People, infrastructure is failing. The programs are all gone. It's going to make people's lives worse over time. It's a quiet, silent killer. So instead of having this monopolized, corrupted environment, what we have to have on the other side is not just robust regulation. You can't have robust regulation as long as you have monopolies. These two things traffic together. And anybody who understands the cycles of capitalism, the moment you start seeing monopolization of markets, you start seeing the corruption that comes out on the other side of it. So these aren't disconnected. It's not just that the Trump administration doesn't, spend any money on these programs, or that they don't, check food or drugs or any of these things, any of these regulations. It's that this has been a buildup for a while. And Nick, you and I, and everybody listening to this, we've lived in a country that for decades, people just get sick or get hurt or die because of industrial malfeasance. These products get worse. All of those things, they are not things that we should accept. Like, this is a thing that is another ringing bell. This is the canary in the coal mine. Oh, this system doesn't work. And that corruption is only going to grow as monopolization continues to grow.
Well, which is the chicken, which is the egg? Is it monopolization, or is it regulation?
They go together. That's the problem, because you can't have monopolization if you're not having politicians that are being bought and sold and therefore changing the law and or not enforcing like actual regulations that we have on the books. Like we talk all the time about something like the IRS, right? The IRS gets all of its money taken away because it takes money to prosecute people who are cheating on their taxes, who are extremely wealthy. And who does that fall on? The rest of us, right? The regular people who are putting in their tax forms. So what we're actually talking about is a simultaneous situation. And it's been taken, I mean, neoliberalism, just to utter the word at the heart of this, we've now experienced decades that have coincided with the corruption that has changed the law while the monopolies have risen up. And as the two grow, it's symbiotic. There's no way to detach one from the other. They're both taking off at the exact same time.
Yeah, and it's frightening. I mean, I wish this was like a new thing that we can say, oh my God, this is happening. We have to do something about this. This has gone back since industrialization, right? Since the dawn of the 20th century. And one day, again, if you want to run on something that would be a winning platform, I would have to imagine this would be it. This would be a really powerful thing to speak to people with.
No, I mean, it's the most relatable thing ever. Nobody wants to get sick. No one wants their kids to get sick. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world. You just have to find the people who will make the argument. Nick, really troubling news. The New York Times, in an investigation, has revealed that last week, as ICE continues to kill people, steal people, brutalize people, that the FBI will no longer be investigating reports of assault engaged between ICE agents and American citizens, which takes away one of the major pieces of oversight as this secret police, this ideologically devoted secret police of Donald Trump, as they continue to become more aggressive. The FBI has more or less been told to stand down so that they will not find evidence that could incriminate ICE agents. This is, again, I'm tired of saying this, this is the next chapter in a larger and an unfurling story.
And by the way, no doubt there'll be attempts to figure out who leaked this as well, which tends to confirm that it's true, right? These the sources that are saying this. So we this isn't even a new story. We know this from what happened in Minneapolis as well. Like they did not do any sort of investigation forensically into Renee Good getting killed. And they continually do this. And so meanwhile, you have the head of the FBI who is filming himself going on private jets and going to the FIBA World Cup final and all this bullshit, touting how there hasn't, his job is doing. This is the kind of thing, like the worst part about all this is that if you were to ask someone of like a person of color, they'd be like, of course, they don't want to, they're not going to investigate this shit. Like, this is not new either. And it will happen again. I can tell you right now, there's going to be more high-profile murders. I don't understand exactly why the last two have faded already, right? There's one in Texas, one in Maine. Like, no one's covering it. No one's outraged. It doesn't seem to have any immediacy. And, nobody's wearing body cams like they're supposed to. Hauselman is out there like a complete and utter asshole saying, oh, it's the Democrats' fault that we don't have body cams when they've approved how many billions of dollars for their budgets. So this is, again, if you're looking for the definitive proof of authoritarianism, like this is the big one, right?
Yeah, and what you're describing there, this is another symbiotic process. So one of the reasons this has faded from consciousness is because it's become normalized. We've seen ICE kill people. Well, I mean, we'll likely see ICE murder another person, and there will be a video of it, and there will be some uproar, but it won't be as large as what happened with Renee Good and Alex Preddy, right? And I hope that I am wrong. I hope at some point or another this reaches a tipping point and people will wake back up to this. But what happens on the other side of it, which I'm really glad that you pointed out, the FBI was doing this without directives. right? They were automatically deciding not to really trouble these things. Now the directive takes the thing that was already happening and it now makes it into, federal statute, right? So chances are the next step in this is probably some legislation. And we'll probably be on here yelling our lungs out saying, why did some Democrats vote for this, right? Like it's almost doubtless if we continue down this trajectory. I hope I'm wrong. And I hope that we take a really, really hard turn away from this thing. But it's literally taking it to the next step, which is what fascism does, which it takes the brutality that is illegal or unethical, and then it turns it legal, right? Because you're taking over institutions, you're taking over systems, and so you're figuring out ways to make the crimes legal and to make the crimes have precedent.
Right. But they're trying to appeal to the silent majority again by saying, if you just comply, then they won't kill you. Where any kind of traffic stop never should ultimately result in killing anybody getting murdered. It's not matching what they're trying to say. And again, without the body cameras, like they have people who are citizens who are filming these things. Thank God they are doing that. And we're seeing that they're lying. They're literally just lying flat out. They're going to probably end up destroying any evidence that would implicate them in any of those crimes. They're not going to do anything about the way they train ICE agents. Oh, we also have all this reporting now that one of the ICE agents that murdered somebody was mentally completely and utterly unstable. And it was bad enough that we get that report from the ex-wife of this officer, but then there's another ex-wife who just came out as well saying this person, there's no doubt, if you told me that that's the job they had as an ICE agent, they'd end up killing somebody. So they're not vetting the people either. It's a really horrible mixture of all these different things. And at this point, you have to imagine it's the goal, like of not vetting and getting as many of these people into this thing. Either I don't think it's a quota thing, right? I think they don't care literally who they're giving guns to and empowering to pull people over.
No, in fact, that's what they're looking for. Paramilitary groups and secret police that belong to fascist administrations and regimes, they're looking for people like this. It's a jobs program for not just unwell people, but people with authoritarian tendencies. It literally incentivizes that. You want people who are going to go out and commit violence because whether or not they know it or not, whether or not they're conscious of it, the entire point of it is to strike fear and complacency in people. It's to make people think twice about, pushing back. And just one last point on this, Nick, what you just brought up, like, eventually, what I was saying, they're going to somehow or another figure out a way to make the illegal thing legal. And in this case, anybody who's going to protest ICE, we've already seen this. They've already thrown people in jail for, dozens of years for, pushing against and protesting against ICE. As we keep seeing from this administration by what they're saying, they're going to figure out a way to declare everybody who pushes against them to be a domestic terrorist, which is then going to change the legal framework of how ICE can interact with them, which will then magically, through alchemy, take this crime and then make it an imperative that they do it. Nick, the last story today, this is a sad little development that I think hasn't really gone much on the radar. The Trump administration shifted the visa rules for foreign students at universities in the United States of America, limiting them to 4 years. This move is going to, I don't know how else to say it. I don't want to be hyperbolic. It's going to more or less destroy the PhD structure within the American higher education system. This is going to have far-ranging effects. Watching this come across the wire as a former academic is a terrible tragedy, honestly, and it is yet another in a long line of self-inflicted wounds that the United States of America is dealing into itself in terms of hurting what it used to stand for, or at least what you could say that the United States of America actually achieved during its tenure of hegemony.
And I suppose what we're also getting towards is that however stupid the people are that are now in charge, I guess those people like to bring everybody with them. right? I'm going to be dumb. You got to be as dumb as I am, and I got to drag you down with me. Because again, that's what it's doing, right? We're losing a sense of what higher academics is supposed to stand for. And I think in their minds, and correct me if I'm wrong, the motivation for this is that they are convinced that higher education in mass in general is simply some sort of a machine that can create liberal people, right? That stand against everything they're for. Is that a fair enough statement?
I mean, that is more or less what the far right ideologues believe. They've long, they've referred to it as the cathedral, which is like journalism, the universities, the culture machines, all of that. They believe that they have to dismantle those things in order to sort of gain full control. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and stop the proliferation of ideas that would lead to people caring for other people or whatever, or universal health care, or whatever the things are that they really are upset about. I feel like you've had enough experience on college campuses to know that they're not necessarily, it's certainly not the faculty, it doesn't necessarily, stand for some sort of liberal bastion of indoctrination of kids, 100% of the time.
No, and it doesn't. I mean, that's one of the great lies that the right has told for a very long time. But I also think there's another aspect that's taking place here. The American Academy has completely relied on foreign students coming in for PhD programs. And for a long time, the American appeal was, this is the place where you go to get a world-class education, right? Cue Neil Diamond singing "They're Coming to America." That was the entire idea. But what we're actually talking about here, Nick, is that the movement by the fascists, the far right, they're trying to destroy sort of the system of the middle class, more or less, trying to get rid of the academy. I'm sure some people will make an argument that more Americans will now go get PhDs that were taken up by foreign students, which is bullshit. That's not going to happen. We're literally going to watch the leveling of higher education in this country in order for America to recede backwards in terms of class and information and innovation. So more or less at the heart of this movement, yes, it's all about plunder, it's all about stealing, it's all about control. But this is about literally destroying something so that you can have a different environment in which you're able to not just control knowledge, but you're able to have a larger economic advantage over people. So we're more or less, and I'm not being hyperbolic again, but this is more or less a different type of a class takeover that is going to put the squeeze, it's going to liquidate not just the middle class, but it's still going to hurt the working class because they're going to suffer the consequences of this takeover as well.
Well, what are the odds that the whole thing, this whole push to do this, resulted from a couple of texts from some very wealthy people whose kids did not get into certain programs?
Oh, I mean, that's certainly part of it. There's a constellation of noises here. Some of these people are donors at universities. They're the type of people that are like, I don't even recognize Yale anymore. Right? Oh, you go over here and there's too many Indians, there's too many Chinese people, there's too many Asian people, which is horseshit. That's just sort of the perception that some of them have. Others are just obsessed with destroying the academy because they see it as their enemy. And in large part, that's built on aggrievement, which is not just I didn't get into these things, but the system didn't necessarily reward me. And a lot of them are incapable and incompetent and untalented. So it is literally, it's cutting the nose to spite the face. Is what it is. And this is going to have, if this continues, and I'm sure that it probably will in some shape or form, this is going to be a huge, huge blow to everything in this country. But they don't pay attention to load-bearing walls. They're literally just bringing it back to Iran. They're literally just destroying load-bearing walls one after another, but they don't care about the consequences. All they care about the short-term gratification and their own enrichment. So as a result, they're not concerned about how this is going to affect things long-term. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of The Muckrake. We will be back with the Weekender edition on Friday. A reminder, if you haven't already, head over to patreon.com/muckrakepodcast. If you become a patron, you gain access to the Weekender, but you also support this project, and we desperately need it, particularly in these times. In the meantime, you can find us over on Blue Sky. Nick is at Nick Hauselman. I'm at J.Y. Sexton. Have yourselves a good day. Be safe.